There's a number that should terrify you. In 1960, the average American household saved about 10% of their income. By 2005, that number hit zero, and today, it hovers around 3%. Meanwhile, America became the wealthiest nation in human history. This shouldn't be possible. Every economic textbook, every financial advisor, every civilization that has ever lasted more than a generation will tell you the same thing. You build wealth by saving. You defer gratification, you spend less than you earn. It's not complicated. It's also not what happened. So how did America get rich while saving almost nothing? The answer involves a magic trick that turned debt into prosperity, transformed houses into ATMs, and convinced an entire country that spending could somehow generate wealth. And for decades, it actually worked until the moments when it very suddenly didn't. Let's start with what changed. In 1944, representatives from 44 countries met in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, and redesigned the global financial system. The dollar became the world's reserve currency, backed by gold, anchoring international trade. Fast forward to 1971, Nixon closes the gold window. The dollar is now backed by nothing except faith and American economic power. This is the moment everything shifts. Without the gold anchor, the Federal Reserve could do something it never could before. Expand the money supply almost infinitely, lower interest rates, make borrowing cheap, really cheap. And Americans, who had lived through Depression-era scarcity and wartime rationing, were suddenly handed an invitation to spend. They accepted. Credit cards, which barely existed in the 1950s, became ubiquitous by the 1980s. Home equity loans were invented, marketed, normalized. You could borrow against your house like it was a piggy bank. Car loans stretched from 3 years to 5, then 7. Student debt exploded from practically nothing to over $1 trillion. Every kind of consumption could now be financed, delayed, spread across years of future payments. But here's where it gets interesting. This wasn't just Americans being irresponsible. This was policy, intentional design, because the United States had stumbled into an economic position so unusual, so historically unprecedented, that the old rules stopped applying. Think about it this way: when you buy a Toyota, your dollars leave America and go to Japan. Normally, Japan would use those dollars to buy American goods, balancing the trade. But what if Japan doesn't want American goods? What if they want something safer, more stable? What if they want to save? They buy us treasury bonds. So your dollars flow to Japan, and Japan sends those same dollars right back to the US government as loans. The circle completes, and suddenly America has discovered something remarkable. The more it consumes, the more foreign nations lend to it. The trade deficit becomes a feature, not a bug. Spending doesn't drain wealth, it attracts it. This is the exorbitant privilege, because the dollar is the global reserve currency, because oil is priced in dollars, because central banks around the world hold dollars as their primary asset. America can run deficits forever. It can consume more than it produces. It can borrow in its own currency, which means it can always print more money to pay debts. No other country gets this. Not really. Not at this scale, and Americans, whether they understood the mechanism or not, lived it. Between 1980 and 2007, household debt tripled relative to income. The savings rate collapsed, but GDP kept growing. Stock markets climbed, housing prices doubled, then doubled again. If you bought a home in 1995 and watched its value increase by 50% by 2005, were you being reckless by borrowing against that equity? Or were you being rational? This is the illusion. Wealth wasn't being built through saving. It was being extracted from asset appreciation. Your house wasn't shelter. It was an investment vehicle. Your 401,000 wasn't a pension replacement. It was a bet on perpetual stock market growth. You didn't need to save cash because your assets were saving for you. Except assets only grow if someone keeps buying them, and someone only keeps buying them if credit remains cheap and available. And credit only remains cheap if foreign countries keep lending to the US. And foreign countries only keep lending if they believe the dollar will remain stable, that America will remain dominant, that the system will hold. It's a confidence game, literally. Now zoom out. China holds over $1 trillion in US debt. Japan holds Similar amounts, oil-producing nations recycle their petrodollars into treasury bonds. This isn't charity, it's strategic. By lending to America, these countries keep the dollar strong and their own currencies weak, making their exports cheaper and more competitive. They're subsidizing American consumption because American consumption keeps their factories running. It's symbiotic. Until it isn't. In 2008, the confidence wavered. Housing prices stopped climbing. Suddenly, all that borrowed wealth, all those home equity lines of credit, all those subprime mortgages built on the assumption that prices only go up, they collapsed, and the entire system seized. The government response: more of the same, lower interest rates to zero, print trillions through quantitative easing, bail out the banks, flood the system with liquidity, because the only thing more dangerous than the debt-fueled consumption model is letting it fail. And it worked again. Stock markets recovered. Housing prices came back. Household debt stabilized, then started climbing again. The savings rate briefly spiked during the pandemic when people couldn't spend, then fell right back down. The system reset, recalibrated, continued. But here's what nobody wants to say out loud. This model has an expiration date. Maybe it's decades away, maybe it's closer, but it requires the rest of the world to keep playing along. To keep accepting dollars, to keep buying treasury bonds, to keep funding American consumption while receiving manufactured goods and IOUs in return. What happens when China decides it doesn't need to export to survive? When oil is priced in yuan or euros? When central banks diversify away from dollars? When the global reserve currency becomes a shared basket instead of a single nation's printing press? America got rich without saving because it convinced the world to save for it. Because it built a system where spending creates demand, demand attracts investment, and investment flows back as debt. It's brilliant, it's fragile, and it only works as long as everyone believes it will keep working. The American consumer isn't just a person buying things. They're the engine of global growth, the dumping ground for surplus production, the debtor of last resort, and they've been playing that role so long, most don't even realize they're playing it. You think you're just buying a car, you're actually keeping a German factory employed and a Chinese treasury department invested in American stability. You think you're just swiping a credit card, you're actually participating in the largest financial experiment in human history. The real question isn't whether America can keep getting rich without saving. The real question is what happens the day the rest of the world stops lending.